The ultimate cheat code for aspiring 3D modelers is to download official character models from gacha games and reverse engineer them. This is absolutely free and legal. I've been abusing this for a while and just started creating my own model with everything I learned from the pro models. And I'm slowly uploading the entire process here on YouTube. Today's topic, bodies. If there's anything that anime gacha modelers do right, it's creating these bodies that are functional and beautiful at the same time, capturing all the right contours efficiently. On the left is a Genshin model, and on the right is a body that I made from scratch by reverse engineering and referencing this Genshin model. And of course, I'll be showing you how to do that yourself. From bottom to top, we got a few key concepts. We've got those neat straight loops whenever possible. We've got increased density during folds and other high deformation areas. Decreased density in low deformation areas. Then we've got these amazing, very gentle leg contours, making the legs look very graceful, but also accentuating some key parts of the anatomy. Then we've got this nice angled edge flow on the hips, which allow for good deforms on both ends of it. We've got the combination radial into squared edge flow for the breasts, a relaxed A pose, and many more small hidden details. Now here's the thing. I first noticed that when you create a low poly body with minimal faces and you subdivide it once, you end up with a very similar mesh density to models from Hoyoverse. So if we can recreate a simple low poly base, give it similar contours to the Hoyo models, apply the subdivision, then after a few finishing touches, we can achieve some very similar results. Let's break it down even further. So enable your auto mirror, enable your loop tools, grab one good reference, linked to my free guide down below if you need it, and let's begin. Let's start by adding a cube to the scene. Then let's tab over to edit mode and scale that up on the x-axis until it's about double its original size horizontally. Let's apply auto mirror onto it. Then let's loop cut it from the top, going this way, and from the other side from the top, and also across the middle, but with two cuts. Let's delete these two top vertices and this one vertex on the bottom. Let's multi-select these two edges, scale them down along the y-axis, and move them inward along the x-axis. This will give us a basic contour for our hips. Now to differentiate front from back, let's take this edge and move it inwards. Go ahead, have a crack at it. And at the bottom we have an edge here, which you might not be able to see because of the x-axis line. It has a vertex right in the dead center, so let's move that about a third of the way, and then loop cut on the other side so that there's two vertices in the middle of that bottom edge. Let's move those downwards slightly. Next we're going to select these 2 points and split them by pressing V. After we split them, let's go ahead and move them to the right. And then I'll slide this bottom point to the right, and I'll slide these points to the left, and we've got this sort of open triangle. I'm going to select these 2 points, create an edge between them, and then cut that edge in half. Then I'll select these 2 points and press F twice, creating a quad and a tri to fill those in. Let's now create the bottom crotch area. Select this point from the front, then reach over and grab this point from the back as well. Press F to create an edge between them, and cut that edge twice. Select these 2 points from the front and press F 3 times to fill in 3 faces. And that's your bottom crotch area. Just gotta select these 2 points now and move them towards the middle. Then select this point and this point, create an edge between them, cut that edge in half, then select these 2 points and fill in those 2 spots. And that's pretty much it for this part. Let's just make this leg opening a bit more circular. You can move the points manually, or you can use Loop Tool's circle, which can be found here on your right hand side in the Edit tab. Now let's extrude down from that opening to create the upper part of the thigh. Now if you're able to get to this point, congratulations. It looks more like a box than a pelvis for now, but we will address that very soon. For now, you've passed the most technical part of the process. In my opinion, the rest of the body is not as procedurally specific. Now real quick, if you had trouble with this part or just want to skip to this exact checkpoint, I've made that available for free download in a blend file on my Patreon. I also released a new tier called Blacksmith if you want a version with multiple checkpoints, including the final results of this tutorial, so you can start or compare at any of those checkpoints. Now moving on to the second part. Let's Control Tab over to Sculpt mode and give these hips some much needed curves. Now don't be intimidated by Sculpt mode. Literally all we're doing is using the grab brush 99% of the time to shape the object in a very intuitive way. Let's start by bringing the waist inwards. So grab these points and move them inwards slightly. Next, let's curve out this edge flow that goes through the middle of the leg. And by that I mean this area where we want that somewhat of a rainbow curve for these edge flows. And this will give us some nice deformation in those areas once it's rigged. We also want to work on this edge flow where it goes a little diagonal around the hips area. And this is very important for deformations when the leg moves to the side. In our modifiers tab, let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Do not apply it yet. Pushing out the butt area. Let's bring in the hips a little more, and if this happens where the mirroring messes up, try using a smaller brush radius so that you don't affect the middle vertices. At this stage, it's also good to make sure your faces are evenly spaced. And here at the back, I'm going to straighten my edges by using the axis scale to squish them down until they're straight. So that's the main focus of this phase: good spacing, good curves, some final fine-tuning in edit mode. We built up a good base silhouette. We're not going to get all the detail now because a lot of it will only be available once we make our subdivision permanent, which will happen in a later step. We've completed another checkpoint, the curved pelvis base. Next, we're going to work upwards by extending the torso, extruding from this top loop. Loop cut this new extrusion until it has evenly spaced quads. In my case, I do 4 loop cuts. Let's select this top loop and do another extrude, but this time scale it down. Move it upwards and inwards slightly. This will be our shoulder/neck region. So after moving those points in, I'll select these 2 points, create an edge between them, split that edge, and then fill in 2 faces. And that leaves us with the neck loop. Whoops, I'll just adjust these so that they're evenly spaced again. And from that neck loop, I'll extrude the neck upwards. Let's actually create a crease on this neck area. Depends how curvy you want the neck transition to be. Now let's tweak this neck size a little. Next step is to create the shoulders. So we're gonna delete one vertex here on the side, this one right in the middle of that shoulder area. And that should open up our shoulder socket, so let's select that loop. Straighten out a little by squishing it on the x-axis, and then let's extrude it to the side. And let's flatten that on the x-axis as well. This creates a nice clean loop for our shoulder/armpit area where we can add more loop cuts easily later. Next, I'll pitch in the belly-abdomen area by scaling it slightly and then sliding it inwards. In object mode, I applied Shade Smooth. And now taking a look at it from the side, let's actually apply Circle on the shoulder region. Scale it down a bit. Now rather than the arm just sticking out of this hole, let's create a shoulder cap by creating an edge between these 2 points splitting it, and then filling in those two faces on the top. Then I'll angle that loop slightly so that it creates that opening for our arms, which will be in A pose. So around a 45-degree angle. This small detail will make it so that when the shoulder deforms on top, it's a little more natural looking. Now let's extrude out from this hole that we made, flatten it, and then angle it again. Then make sure that opening is circular, or as always, we can use the circle procedure. Shoulder area complete. Now let's take a look at it from the side. There's a few things to be done here. Let's curve the back inwards, move the neck backwards, move the shoulders backwards for some good posture, move the upper chest area / clavicle area inwards. And yeah, those are the three main changes. And then I make a bunch of small tweaks here. Feel free to make tweaks and improvements to your body mesh at any time. And remember to flip back to your reference just to make sure everything is the right size and length. As you can see, my proportions are pretty weird right now, but fortunately you can make sculpt tweaks at pretty much any point in the process. Now let's move on to breasts. Select this vertex in the middle of the chest area. It should be under the shoulder area. Now select that whole opening and turn off clipping on your mirror modifier, unless you want a uni boob. Now extrude this out and scale it down at the end. Move it outwards, squish it along the y-axis, create an edge between these 2 points in the middle, split that edge, and then face fill those. These don't look right now, but we'll curve it out. Add another loop cut to the middle of the boob. I select this part and move it inward, leaving that middle point sticking out. Scale that down slightly. And one more loop cut. This amount of cuts should give us enough control for now, but just like the other parts, we'll revisit after we apply subdivision. Going over into sculpt mode, I try to make it more spherical with the grab tool and give it a slight teardrop shape. More tweaks. The torso is a little too long, so I scale it on the Z-axis and I move the points upwards. This technique is very useful in this phase because there's not a lot of points to work with. So you can easily select them, scale them down, move them around to quickly make some big tweaks. You can turn clipping back on. This will keep the middle vertices in place. We're almost done with this stage. I'm just gonna add another loop to the thigh here so that I can close up that thigh gap a little. Shorten the torso even a little more. Man, that cake looking weird right now, but again, after we apply subdiv, we can make it look better. Here, just making sure the hip angle is the way I want it to before I finally apply the modifiers. So I apply the modifiers from top to bottom, then re-add the auto mirror, and now we've got more detail to work with. So just to give you a mini overview of what we're doing here, we're trying to capture like this kind of shape right here. This part, as you'll see, was originally a pole, which is just an intersection of 5 quads. Nothing really wrong with that, but we're just gonna cut here so that it maintains this edge flow. Over here at the back, we're just gonna add some supporting loops for the butt area. The detriangulate operation didn't work too well in this area, so don't look into these weird artifacts too much. And then we're just gonna slightly increase the density in the butt and the breasts, which merge down as it goes up with some usage of triangles. So let's select this point, move it in that direction, and use our knife tool. Click these 2 points to create new edges between them. Now one edge down from that point, I'm gonna make these 2 cuts, then press delete and select dissolve vertices. Then I'll cut from this point to this point. This edge flow is now similar to the one that we saw in the Genshin model. Flipping over to the back side, we also have some tweaks to do here. I cut from this point in the bottom of the crotch upwards, up until the butt ends. Deviating slightly from the Genshin model, I do terminate the edge around here, using a triangle. Now I select this edge and move it inwards. This creates some much needed cheek separation, but it's dual purpose. It provides a deform support for the legs when they move apart. There's an awkward pole here, and I also want to increase the density in this area. So I decide to shift that over to the left and cut a new edge right in between this area. And I also want to create a crease detail here at the bottom of the cheek, so I will cut horizontally as well from this point. Terminate it on the side of the hip. And then after I dissolve this edge, everything is all good. All quads in that area. And terminate this into a triangle right here. There's not a lot of deformation going on in these termination points, so we're good. To take advantage of this additional crease detail that we've created, I like to manually indent it in edit mode to prep it a little for the curves that we make in sculpt mode. Let's move this edge in together slightly. At this point, two things. I want to make it a little more smooth, which will also require a few more cuts. So I'll take this opportunity, select the entire cheek. Over here in edit mode, I press 3 to edit face select mode. And I just select all the butt vertices except for that middle crease. I press Shift H to hide everything else. I'll now go over the edges one by one using the relax tool, restoring some of that roundness and evening out the spacing. I make sure to do it both horizontally and vertically. Then I'm gonna add loop cuts as I think are necessary and then span them out by using edge slide. One more in that area. And let's do another round of vertical and horizontal relaxing. You can access relax quickly either through your search function or your quick favorites. Then I press Alt H when I'm done to unhide everything else. Because we cut in some extra edges, we have to terminate those edges so that we're not left with n-gons. So I merge those into the side of the hip, readjust this area and finish those cuts that were created. And now that we have acceptable density in this area, we can go ahead and make some more tweaks. Up here around the neck, this could be a little more natural in this area. I'm gonna create a cut that joins up with the front. So select those two, press M, and then merge at center. On the back as well, select these two, M, merge at center. The poles above and below the breast are a little weird, so I'm gonna do something about those. For under the breast, I'll prefer to have this area quads and then terminate it into a triangle towards the belly area. I think my brain malfunctioned for this part, but I will show you what went wrong and how I fixed it in a minute. Ooh, retention baiting with bad topo, that's a new tech. First, I need to make some changes to these boobies. I select the loop around the sides and bottom of it, then mark that area as sharp so that it has a bit of separation. This comes handy in the texturing phase when we make base shading. Then I move it inwards a little to connect it to the torso. And I like cutting an edge here so that the pec area flows nicely into that outer edge of the armpit. And I relocate the tip of the sharp edge to there. Let's add one loop cut to the armpit area. You can add one or two more if you want. Just gives better deformation when the arm is raised above the shoulder area. Now, similar to the butt, I'm gonna isolate and curve out this breast and add a little more edges to it. So same process, I'm just gonna add a couple of loop cuts. I make sure to update the spacing by sliding the surrounding points around. Then I select the outer edge, apply a relax to it. Then I go in radially, relaxing these loops. Then I go in vertically and horizontally until it's all smoothed out. Now it will be easier to sculpt because the spacing and the curves are better now. Now let's unhide, we got some cleanup work to do. Here on the back, this is slightly better. Terminate this new edge into a triangle. Terminate this horizontal edge that we made. Terminate the vertical edge at the bottom, then the horizontal edge into the side. For the shoulder socket poles, I'm cutting them the same way that I saw on the belly that they did. And then I finally address this abomination. This doesn't have to be two triangles, it can just go straight up like this. And then dissolve those two diagonals. Oof, that feels a lot better. Gonna move these termination points one face to the right. Straighten out these abdomen loops. And well, that's everything complete except the arms and the legs now. Now technically you could have extruded the arms and the legs in the pre-subdiv phase, but it doesn't really make a big difference, so I prefer doing this part first so that the arms aren't in the way when I'm making adjustments to the torso. And I don't have to hide, unhide, all that nonsense. So to start this off, pretty simple, right? You just extrude out of the arm and leg loops and you scale down at the end. Now for this part, especially for me who struggles with leg anatomy, is where reference is super important. Do not go in without it. The legs may not seem very complicated, but the contours are very subtle. So I did a contour breakdown on the front and sides, and those arrows are where to push in or push out the curves. It would probably add a whole 10 minutes to this video if I explained every single muscle and curve going on here, so this is the most efficient way I can convey this info to you. Now that's complicated, but the way I tackled this is pretty straightforward. I just add loop cuts wherever those curve details are needed, starting with the knees. The whole calf area will be angled back slightly because of the character wearing heels, usually. And for each contour, I just add the loop cuts, push them in and out with sculpt mode, and then move on to the next contour. So we've got the basic shape for the calves. We indent the knees a little more from the outer, and then start working on the thighs. The thighs bulge out near the top and push in near the knees. From the side view, the thighs bulge out slightly at the front, and we tackle that with some proportional editing. Sometimes it's better to use proportional editing because if you solely rely on your grab brush from the side view, you may accidentally just keep pushing out the outer side of the leg while neglecting the inner side. But proportional editing allows you to avoid that. This is another useful tool, the pose brush, that can allow you to angle the top and bottom halves of the legs. And I'm swapping back in between my tools, proportional editing, grab brush, pose brush, just trying to work out these curves. The vertices can get a little messy, but we can always fix it afterwards. I make sure to view and sculpt from top and bottom angles as well, because again, to counteract that bias of when we were only on the side view and tweaking it from there. Gotta make sure it looks good from all angles and all angles are worked on. Just like the boobs and the butt, when we want to smooth out, we can isolate selections such as the knee area to give it a horizontal and vertical relaxing. And I'll do this on each section of the leg after everything gets messy, just to iron out the kinks. The arm follows a similar process, but thankfully it's a lot less complicated than the leg. Perhaps the most defining contour here is the start of the forearm where it just bulges out. And the next step logically is to add the hands and the feet. Now those are a whole video on their own, so I still have to make that. For now, I do have old tutorials on my channel for hands and feet. Or you can do what I'm doing here, which is adding placeholder hands and feet, just so I can visualize the proportions better. So we're now at the final step of polishing everything, getting our proportions right, and making any final tweaks as needed. And this mesh is very wonky right now in terms of proportions, but because the topology is fairly organized, it's mostly just a matter of spotting what needs to be fixed and doing some scaling and sculpting. And sometimes those are hard to see until you put the hands, the feet, and the head on the model. So I saw the shoulders were too broad for this style, the arms were really long, and I wanted to make the leg contours more similar to the reference, and make the lower half a little wider. So I decided I'm just gonna grab some old feet and hands and attach it for now, just by joining it and using bridge edge loops, while the ends of the hands and the arms and the feet and the legs have matching edge loop vertex counts. Let me leave you with some things I did to close out the modeling with some final touches and checks after I was happy with the proportions. One thing to do is to add supporting loops to the folding areas. So I added some to the knee. If you want to be even more specific to like what Genshin did, they kept it dense at the front, but they merged it down at the back. So they had something kind of going on like that. And even at the front, like it was a little dense for the calf area. So what they ended up doing was around here, they just merged this one down. Everything that can fold in this model, usually you can add additional loops easily, because that's just how the way the model is built. Even the armpit, you can add even this area, right? Because this goes all the way around this one. So if you feel like you need some more hip support, all of that is available. That's why I like this modeling style a lot, because it's fairly clean, it's not too dense, so you could always tweak it on the fly. And it's always easier to go from lower poly and add detail than start high and then subtract what you don't need. It's way simpler to do the first option. I shouldn't forget, see how like these leg loops are messed up? Oops, turn off proportional and just flatten these out. You won't really lose curve data. If you do, it's a very minimal amount of curve data that you're losing. Do that for the thigh as well. You can leave the parts alone, like for example, the calf, because it naturally bends like that, and the knee. But this lower calf area and the thighs is fair game for this. Ooh, pelvic tilt, that's also a good one. Let's say like, because I have a slight anterior, is it posterior? No, it's anterior pelvic tilt, so she's leaning slightly forward. You can select the entire upper half. Let's make sure it's like on a full loop like that. Turn on proportional, and we can rotate it and then use your scroll wheel to dictate like how much smoothness or influence you want to give to the other areas. And you can easily just move it back like that. And there you go, you fixed her posture. Ooh, that's gotta be relieving for your lower back. You can do it too here if you want to like adjust the tilt on your leg, forward or backwards, or you can just move it back like this. At this point, when you want to make large scale tweaks and you don't want to get everything messy again, then proportional editing is your best bet. And here's a quick comparison to my last body mesh that I did where I unfortunately didn't rely on a reference. But I think the leg contours are a lot better than before. We got that nice edge flow on the hips like we wanted. But anyways guys, that's gonna be it for this video. So stay tuned as I continue to reverse engineer anime models to create my character. This is currently the second video in this series, but eventually we'll have a full process. And I'll have all of those neatly in a playlist called How to 3D Model Like a Pro, something like that. Once again, you could head over to my Patreon and I'll give you the first 1 or 2 steps of this process for free, just in case you were having trouble with that part or you just want to skip to that. And if you sub to my $5 reward tier, then for this month, you can grab this full file where it has all of the stages of this process, including the finished product. And heck, I'll even throw in my old hands and feet. So you can pretty much grab this as a base mesh for $5 until the end of October. And yes, all future tutorials will have a file like this. So if you sub for October, you'll get a file like this for all the tutorials in October, where it has the end result example and a bunch of checkpoints along the way. Thank you once again. And as always, take care. Have yourselves a good night. Oh, and click here if you haven't seen the last video in this series where I reverse engineer how they make complex anime hairstyles.